Hey mamas, welcome to Fall into High School and Beyond. Jessica Coulter here, the CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring and your summit hostess. At this event, we're empowering your teens to learn beyond today. And helping us do that is today's guest, her name, Dr. Nerissa Bauer, the CEO of Let's Talk Kids Health and the owner of NB Behavioral Pediatrics. So Dr. Bauer, thanks for joining us.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I love having you here because we're talking about ADHD, and I know that's something that you have helped a lot of families with, a lot of teens with as well. And I'm excited because we're going the direction my science brain is excited about, more into kind of the science of the hows and the who's. So I want to start there. Just, are there things about ADHD that are different between like guys and girls, males and females, that we really don't necessarily know that our mamas should be told about?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think it's really important because, first of all, I will start off by saying that ADHD is not a behavior problem, okay? A lot of times there's misconceptions about ADHD and people who have them being called lazy and unmotivated and all of those things. I love to help empower kids and parents at time of diagnosis to understand that their brain is a beautiful thing. And I will be first to say that ADHD itself as a label is a bad name. I do not like the word disorder. And I think ADHD, attention deficit, is very misleading. It kind of makes kids think that they can't pay attention, and that is absolutely not true. So we have to help them understand how their brain works and learn to work with it. Because I often tell kids, we cannot give you a brain transplant because that would make you not you. So, and your parents love you and you like yourself. So we need to help empower you to understand how that brain of yours works. And so ADHD presents very differently in boys versus girls and girls and women in general. We're learning so much about ADHD. In the past, I would say that we often we might have this inkling that, kids who are ADD versus ADHD. And by the way, we never use that nomenclature anymore. We don't use that label ADD versus ADHD. It's all ADHD, but we do classify it by the symptoms. So in general, and these are generalizations, but we tend to think that the hyperactive impulsive subtype, the kids who are climbing and can't sit still and running across the street and it's super active, those kids typically come to us as a pediatrician early, in preschool age, and they tend to be more boys than girls, but it doesn't mean it can't be girls. But then, kind of around the age of grade 4, kids no longer are learning to read, they're reading to learn, which is a very different skill set, right? And so we often know that at that time and beyond, girls tend to come much more into focus, and diagnoses tend to happen for girls later than boys. But we also know that ADHD often has a best friend. It's called anxiety.
Mm.
Depression, learning disabilities. So oftentimes 66% of kids who have ADHD end up having more than one mental health condition, sometimes not always diagnosed at the same time, but it's super important to have the doctor monitor how that child is functioning because things can pop up. Girls can mask symptoms in the classroom. Oftentimes their teacher they might not realize that the child is zoning out or not paying attention because we can cover it up really well. And so it really does take some careful history taking, some good observation, and some really great interview questions to have the teen self-reflect on what are their challenges? What are some of the things that gets in the way of them doing the best they can in the classroom and at home and with homework to really understand the big picture?
Wow. Okay. So a lot of information there. So I feel like we can determine with the boys sooner. Is that kind of what I heard? Nurse says that with the boys, it's generally easier to decide sooner on, whereas with the girls, it's later on because of anxiety, because of the other mental health, but also because maybe they're not the ones jumping out of their seats. They're not the ones running around like we see the boys doing.
Yeah, yeah. And again, those are broad
Mm.
generalizations. So Yes,
Definitely.
yes,
I think about the teens I work with. I mean, I don't specialize in neurodiversity. I kind of, to me, study skills, it's like everyone needs them, no matter if I'm talking to a seventh
yes,
grader or college senior. But honestly, yeah, the kids that have been labeled or diagnosed with ADHD more likely to be male than female. I see that all the time, and so it's like, and I even think about for me, you said kind of how it's changed, and I feel like yeah, when I was a kid, it was never the girls even considered to have ADHD. I feel like that's finally changing, but it didn't seem to used to be that way.
yes, absolutely.
Hmm. Well, I know that our listeners might be going, okay, yes, my kid has ADHD, okay, but now tell me more. Like, what do I do? Like, what are some treatment options? So I feel like with your medical background, we can actually dive into that. So I wonder what your thoughts are, what your advice is, especially as we go into a new school year and there's all of that newness. But then if we have a diagnosis on top of that, or we're trying to find a new, better option, I'm wondering what you
Yes.
would like to tell our mamas.
Yeah. So, when people come to see me, obviously as a physician, when I talk about the diagnosis, their minds automatically go to treatment, and treatment is often synonymous with medicine. I
Mm-hmm.
will say though that yes, medicines are the first line for kids with ADHD or teens, but pills don't teach skills. Yes, I write for a lot of medications, but sometimes there are other things, most of the time, there are other things that we have to do in addition to that. And families often have different opinions on whether medicine is the way they want to go. And I honor that all the time. We can never force anybody to do something that they're not ready to, but we have those discussions about what a care plan is. So I'd like to invite all the mamas that are listening to think about broadening your perspective when it comes to ADHD treatment, and know that part of that can be medications, but also behavioral therapy or coaching, tutoring, right? Helping build those skills, those executive functions, but also school accommodations. How do we maximize and optimize the learning experience for our kids? 504s, IEPs, all those different things. And then also self-care strategies. I think it's a disservice if we don't start talking to our kids often about these things. Like, what role does nutrition play? Do we have to fuel not just our bodies, but our brains, having a protein in every meal, making sure to get healthy fruits and vegetables in, and all of those things are important. The importance of sleep. Our body is doing a lot of things when we're sleeping. So when kids get upset at parents for saying you need to go to sleep, I want them to really understand why they need it. There's that we need to restore ourselves. And I tell kids that everything that we learned for the day, our brain sort of has to use that sleep time to pick up after ourselves, so that way it files away all those memories and those learnings and those knowings. So that way, when we have to recall it, it's so much faster to retrieve it because it knows exactly where it is in the brain's file cabinet, right? So sleep is the time when we consolidate those working memory and the memories. We also use that time to actually, because we're devoid of sensory input, our brain has the quiet space it needs to kind of work through issues that we were kind of thinking about through the day. And it also uses that time to rebuild and remake those neurotransmitters, that dopamine, that norepinephrine, that serotonin that our brains need to function properly. So sleep does have a biologic function. And so sleep is super, super important. Think about when you don't sleep enough, right? And
Yeah.
how hard it is to focus and concentrate. So if we can really help our kids understand the importance of sleep, that's important. Also, then self-care strategies include physical activity. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity every day. That doesn't have to be done in 60-minute time blocks, but you could be broken up through the day as long as our kids are feeling like their heart rate is up, they're sweating a little bit, because that just promotes mental wellness in addition to physical health. And then screen time moderation, right? We live in an age of screens. We all love our screens, and learning is done on screens too. But we also have to talk with our kids about the importance that it doesn't like take over. We need to be outside. We need to get vitamin D. We need to make the social connections with the people in our lives, because that's going to be just as important. And then lastly, parenting support. So things like this that you're offering, helping parents get good information so that they understand, because sometimes it's easy to read books, but it's not easy then to take that information and apply it, right? So things like this where you can interact with people, ask questions, be thinking about and be exposed to different ideas are really helpful ways to get parenting support as well. But I also say, lastly, to kids, if we do medication, I want them to know that medicine is kind of like gas for a car. Just putting gas in the car doesn't make the car go. It's the driver that makes the car go, right? So I don't ever want kids to become over reliant on the fact that they're taking a medicine and then blame the fact that they didn't take their medicine, that, oh, sorry, I can't do that today because I didn't take my medicine. So it is so important. Yes, medicine can help the brain work more efficiently, but kids need to be empowered with the skills to be able to work with that brain too.
Mm. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that yeah, I haven't taken my meds, or I'm out of my meds, or I'm kind of like they're wearing off. Yes, I've heard all of that, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's with my students one-on-one. I have heard
Yep.
that all. Mm.
Yep.
So I'm thinking you bring up an important point. I mean, I had no idea there were so many treatment options. I mean, you give a new ideas to sleep. I think some of our listeners might be going, oh, maybe that's why I'm struggling with this or that. It's just because I'm not sleeping enough. But I wonder if when people come to you, when parents do, and they're trying to decide, yeah, are meds right for me, or should I be focusing on other things? Like, what is the answer? I mean, is there a no, like you said, we've been too reliant on meds, it's time to change? Is it we're finally ready to go to, like, where's that kind of line?
Yeah, that is such a great question and a hard one to answer. So, as a physician, I want to always honor the where people are at, right? I don't ever like force them to start anything they're not ready to. I mean, as a parent of kids myself, I want to have agency to make that decision, as well as give my kids the input, like have their input as well. However, there are a couple times where parents should consider medicines a little bit sooner than later.
Okay.
One is in the setting of when you have a very hyperactive, impulsive individual, because it only takes one running out in front of the car in the street, safety concern, right? If they're getting, they're about to get expelled from preschool or school, things like that. I mean, that's where we know that yes, skills are important, but in order to definitely make a change quickly, medicines are safe when done and overseen by someone trained to do so, but it can help decrease the severity and frequency of those symptoms so that way our kids can start getting wins. You know, they're not doing this on purpose. This is the fact that their brain does not have enough dopamine and norepinephrine to really focus. And so that's what medicine does. It helps make sure that the brain has enough of that, regardless of if there's interest and motivation in the subject, right? So, and so that's one time. The other time is when we have kids who are already starting to have signs of low self-esteem, because things are hard. Kids with ADHD often will hear things like, well, why can't you do this? Why can't you remember to take home your homework? Why can't you remember to turn it in? You already did it. Then they start hearing this narrative inside their voice and their head, and they're like, why? Why is that? Something's wrong with me. And so, in those instances, having medicine on board just to make things a little bit easier so that kids can start getting those wins and it helps build those neural pathways of, huh, I can do this. And it's snowballs, right? So, it is a moving target, I'll tell you, parents. It's really is. We've got maturity on our side as time goes on, brain maturation, and all of those moving pieces of the treatment care plan that we always have to be looking at any point in time to just make sure our kids are thriving.
Mhm. I'm glad that I asked that question because I was kind of wondering, is like, is there ever a time? Because I feel like that's a question that sometimes I get asked. I was like, okay, this is not something I really know anything about. So yeah, I'm glad, Nerissa, that we could talk about it. And I feel like you make a very good point with the impulsive, and yeah, if it's the behaviors that they're pretty much out of control because they can't control it and they need some help,
Yes.
let alone Yeah, we talk about confidence, we talk about self-advocacy in my Love to Learn program, not because it's, because everyone knows it, it's because no matter if we're talking ADHD or not, teens don't seem to know how to do that on their own. They need a little help. And ADHD just
Yes.
adds more to it. Hmm.
Yes.
Oh, well, I don't want us to go too far. I'm trying to keep it because we've got so much goodies, so many goodies already. But I don't feel like we talked about food specifically. I know you mentioned nutrition, so I'm wondering, is there something food related with ADHD that, especially as we're thinking like school lunches and we're going back to school, are there things that, you know, foods are yay for ADHD and things that we should make sure that our kids or teens are staying away from?
Yeah, so a couple things. Let's start with what we think we need to like focus on too. So protein, I said at every meal, especially because, when you fill up your body with carbs, it sort of gives you that quick jolt of energy and then a quick down. So I always explain that concept to kids, that hangriness thing, that is a
Yeah.
true phenomenon.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that our brain has the fuel sources it needs to really power through the day and really making that blood sugar more steady. And the way we do that is by having a protein source at every meal. Secondly, omega-3 and omega-6 are polyunsaturated fatty acids, come from wild fish, 3 servings a week. And the reason that's important and why we like to kind of talk about that is because the brain is made up of mostly fat, 60% fat, and we have to replenish that. In order for our neurons to fire and signal correctly, it's wrapped in myelin sheaths that are made of fats. And so if you're not consuming 3 servings of wild fish like tuna, mackerel, and salmon every week, which a lot of people aren't, then we talk about supplementation with omega-3s and omega-6s. So of a lot of different supplements out there, I think there are a few that I like to recommend. So omega-3 and 6. Also a probiotic, because there is emerging research about the brain and gut kind of link there and inflammation. So I would highly recommend a probiotic, and then vitamin D as well. And then magnesium, because we know that those are some of the things that ADHD kids are deficient in, and it can just help with sleep as well as with ADHD in general. There's some controversy around the role of, gluten and food dyes. I will say that if you yourself want to do these things, you can, and there are some evidence to show that it can help. But compared to the effect that medicines can bring, it's much lower, and so it's more subtle. Okay. And so it's not going to be the big thing that makes a huge difference, but there are families who swear by this. So I will say that if a family is so impassioned to try this, you can. It is a little bit harder because you can't just eliminate something for one child and not everybody else in the household too. So there's no harm in trying it for at least a month and seeing what happens, eliminating those red dyes, eliminating, artificial sugars and processed foods, gluten, and doing one at a time to really see what effect each of those things has on your child's mood, behavior, and focus.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know there was so many things when we talked about nutrition that we needed ADHD. I had no idea. Okay. I gotta tell you, I'm thinking for myself personally with vitamin D, like I immediately go milk, but I also know I go sun. So is there a difference when we're talking vitamin D for ADHD kids? I mean, is,
Oh, I mean, if you had to pick one, I'd always say going outside. I mean, for the benefits of physical activity, the sunshine, the connection with people outside. I think a lot of people also stress that, with recess being cut down, to like minutes during the school day, it's so important for us to get movement and stuff. And so getting outside is going to be my biggest one that I push.
there you go. It's kind of what I figured, but I was like, when you said that, I was like, that is so funny. I was like, how would you say that? So, oh goodness. Okay. I want to ask so many more questions, but Nerissa, I want to make sure we talk about your freebie too. So what goodie do you have for our mamas that they can opt in to get?
Yes, so thank you. I'm really excited to share this one. It's my What is ADHD workbook. I think as a physician, I have the honor of sort of walking alongside families in this journey. But one of the things that often happens before I created this is that, when we're talking together about what's happening, oftentimes people, physicians, psychologists, therapists, teachers will throw out these terms and kids are like, what is that? They're in their brain, they're like, what is that? They might not have the agency to ask, but I always wonder as I'm sitting there watching the kiddo, like, what are they thinking? And I want to give them the space and invite them to have that conversation with a trusted person, whether it be the doctor or the parent or both of us. I mean, ideally, it should be the whole team, right? And so I created this workbook so that way it's a tool for parents to begin that conversation with your child. What are your thoughts about that? What do you know about it? And then it also focuses on what are the strengths? Who are the other famous people out there that have ADHD? It shouldn't be something we're ashamed of. So this tool and workbook will help you start those conversations that can really set the tone and the stage for how your child views their brain.
I love that. So I'll make sure that link is down below so everybody can grab that. And then do you mind sharing your website, your socials, all those awesome places they can find you?
Of course. So my website is letstalkkidshealth.org. And there you will find on the menu the different things that I offer. So I might have a YouTube channel. I have a Instagram and Facebook group. And then I also have just a lot of different information there. I have a blog that I don't write to regularly, but there are things there. So I also have a course called Teach Me ADHD, which is designed for kids 8 to 12 to take with their parents. And now, new this September, we're launching our Teach Me ADHD Director's Cut series for teens, ages 13 to 18. And instead of a detective theme, we have a theater theme. So we want our teens to become directors of their lives and to be able to learn all about their brain and do those little workshops to figure out those skills. So thank you for the opportunity. Please connect with me on social media. And it's always a pleasure to connect with like-minded people working in this space, helping support families.
Yes, this has been amazing, Nerissa. So thank you so very much. And I know I could ask so many more questions. So it's like, okay, when my page is full, I was like, okay, yeah, I know I'll be reaching back out and going, what else should we talk about? So thank
Yeah,
you.
please do. Please do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And mamas, thank you for listening in. Have an awesome day. Keep an eye on your email for your next interview. Talk to you soon.